So what can you make with just 100 charm squares? I am going to show you the fastest method to create an adorable baby quilt in just minutes. Literally, you can finish this quilt in a day. It is so easy. We don't even need a pattern. You're going to love this. It's simple, it's fast, and it is so flexible. It is so easy to put together. You use your scraps, you use your charms, whatever fabric you have, just cut it into 100 pieces and you're good to go. I'm Leah Louise from Inspired Quilting by Leah Louise, and I'm excited to share this with you. It is a fantastic little quilt. It's an adorable baby quilt, but it can be a lap quilt. It can be any size you want, and you just might recognize this method. So let's go ahead and get started. I am anxious to show this to you. I love when I wake up in the morning and know exactly the quilt I want to make. And this is where it starts. These are my fat quarter bundles that I received. The Fat Quarter Shop, this is my April and March. And look at these colors. I love how they go together. Those beautiful light blues and greens with some gold and yellow, kind of light buttery colors. And then, of course, we get some of my turquoise in here. But you know that's not going to be enough. So I had to find some more, and let me show you what I found. I found these three that I absolutely love, and I had bundled them together because I knew I wanted to use them for something, and they're going to work beautiful. Now, these are light blue gold, and that's great, but because there's turquoise kind of mixed in a few places, I'm bringing the turquoise in to emphasize that. It's one of my favorite colors. It's my island quilt that I love. I love that color with the bright, the floral, the foliage, but I love the color of the water, and this is what it reminds me of. Now, fortunately, what I'm going to do is make a charm square quilt, and if you've seen how I cut my fat quarters, you know that I cut strips of 5-inch lengths, and then that way I can come back and get individual charm squares. So these are all pre-cut to 5 inches, and I'll link the video above that shows how I do my pre-cuts when I get these fat quarters, because I like to trim them down relatively soon after I get them, so I'll use them, because if they sit in this pretty package, I'm going to admire them, love them, put them aside, and go work on something else. Well, that's silly. Besides, in order to get more fabric, I have to use what I have, and that's just sort of a rule that I have. And I'm always using scrappy fabric, pieces that are left over, or stash that I bought, or something that somebody gave me. And so it's really important for me to include lots of colors. I love it that way, and I get to use more fabric. So these three will look great. And these lightest colors, like you can see here, these are pretty light with a white background, as is this one too. I want to bring in enough light to offset the darks. Now, I don't know that I'm going to go with all these darks, but I had, let's see, here's just a pile that I grabbed. I'm probably not going to go with purple, so we'll set that aside. Or the peach. Oh, there are some options in here. Let's just take a look. So definitely these. And I like that because it's the lighter variation of this. It brings in a little bit of that gold color, but also a bit of chartreuse, which makes things nice and bright. And I had some of these pieces that are left over from another project. And this looks like it's sort of the same fabric, but this is a bit darker. So I'll bring in some of those, because when I have lots of prints, I like to include some almost solid colors, to break it up. And so I have this one. Look at that's just a perfect match. And then here's some more turquoise. It might be too turquoise. I don't know. We'll have to see. But this works. These work. I'm kind of going with pastels here. Do you see that? That's interesting. Oh, here's some darker ones, though. I love the darker ones. Ooh, that's pretty. That'll look great. Look at that right there. And okay, so you can tell my favorite part is the fabric. And those of you who have watched know that that's the case. I'm pulling these out because the colors are great. I'm staying away from these because I don't want to get too purpley pink. And I want to keep this in the blues and greens. And we have some light accents of it, but that's fine. I just don't want to get too heavy. And oh my gosh, I want to put this in there in the worst way. Look at that. Okay, maybe I'll put a couple pieces in because that looks awesome. And look at, see, right up there, we have these sort of purpley colors. So maybe I need to do that. Not so much the light ones. This might be a bit too much. I do love that print though. And then these are just some sort of background. Oh, I like those though. So I'm going to put these aside. I'm going to put these aside. This because it's too light. I like the one with the more intense blue color. And I like this a lot. Those could work in there. And this is something else that I found. Look at these my gold flowers. They look like maybe they're chrysanthemums, or this looks like a dahlia. But these are kind of some neutrals. And again, these are my 5-inch strips. So I can come through here and pick and choose what I'd like to use, and I'm good to go. So there we are. Staging, planning ahead helps me tremendously when I get ready to start my quilt. And now I'm going to get everything cut. And we're going to make this quilt so fast. You're not going to believe how quick this is. I have my 100 charms all selected, and I'm dividing them into groups of 4s. And I'm going to have a total of 4 piles because each block I'm making will take 25 charms. And so I have these. I pretty much had 4 of everything, but where I didn't, I just added something that was similar in color and background. And that's not necessary, but if you're doing totally scrappy, just go with it. But what I'm doing is I want to keep the color scheme kind of the same. So I'm going to take my piles and put them in 4 different piles. But whoops, let's get the right ones here. Yeah, I can do that one. And then this one goes here. So this is where I get confused. All right, and then this goes there. There's 3, and then here's 4. So I cut them in stacks, the ones from the new fat quarters, so that they're already layered to go. Now, for example, this one, I had 3 out of this blue pile, and I took 5 out of the multicolor. Now, some of these are going to need a little extra pressing, and I'll take care of that. So there's these 5. So what I'm doing is creating 4 different piles that have mostly the same fabrics. And I just want to do that so I have continuity throughout the quilt. And I also change it up along the way just so there's a little bit of difference and not everything is completely duplicated. And so when I get these divided between my 4 piles, then I'm going to start sewing them, and we're just going to chain stitch them. So let me go ahead and get this pile together, these 4 piles actually, and then I will get them pressed and I will meet you at the sewing machine. This is such a great, easy quilt. It can be done in a day. It can probably be done in an afternoon. I'm only going to use 25 of my charm squares at a time and make one big block that's 5 by 5 squares. So what I do is I take a little gift bag and I just throw one group of my 25 blocks, and because if I don't hide them from me, I'm going to put them in a particular order, and chances are I'll repeat that throughout a lot of the different blocks. So I'll just grab a few and I will start putting them together. And then I will grab some more, add to it, and just go through. But what I want to show you is the chain stitching method that I use, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, but it really does make things go a lot easier. Remember, when you start your thread, hold it with your finger like this, because that way you're not going to get that knotted thread underneath. Because what happens is that bobbin thread and the top thread kind of get tangled initially if it's not taut and held a bit tight, and it loops around and it makes a mess on the back of your blocks. So just I kind of go between lights and darks just to keep some interest going. And let's see here. So I've got this one. And I'm just going to work my way through. Oops, that one didn't get pressed. It was folded over. And let's see, I'll take this one. And just such pretty colors. I love these pastels. This is one of my favorite fabric collections. I made a quilt for a little girl years ago out of all these colors and different prints. It was so pretty. All right, now I'm just going to go grab a few more out of my bag. Whoops. Drop. Easier said than done. Here we go. So I've got my next group. And let's see, we'll get some lights and darks here. And run through this. So I can't remember if that's 3 or 4. Okay, that's 4. So I have one more that I want to do. And we haven't done one of these. And we have one of those, but that's up there, so they're not close together. So that makes this work well. I don't want to put 2 of the same too close together and have them repeat. All right, so now that I have my 5, I'm going to come up and do the same thing. And let me just do that with these few. And we'll move on from here. So here we go. Put this one on. Oops, that one's a little long. And you'll find when you cut your own charm squares, you know, sometimes you do a great job and they all come out perfect, but rarely does that happen. Now, sometimes I'll find if it's a little longer, the first thing I'll do is measure and say, okay, is one particularly short or long? And what it is this blue one's a little on the short side. So what I'll do when I sew it, oh, no, it's not. This is the one that folded over. Well, there's my problem. So yes, pressing correctly is always helpful. This obviously turned over while I was pressing and didn't get caught, but now we're good. But what I was going to say is if you get 2 charm squares and they're not good matches, here, let me go ahead and get a dark one here. And let's say one's bigger than the other. Then what I would do, look, of course, now these are all looking pretty good. Rarely is that the case, but I will put one inside the other and make an even margin on each end so that if there's any overhang or shortage, that it's sort of blended between the two. Now what I'm doing is making sure that I don't have this block down here already. And let's see what we have here. That's kind of light. Let's go with something different. This is pretty. I like that gold color. And after the gold, then I added one more. So I have 3 across and I have 5 rows. Now what I need to do is add 2 more. Once I get all 5, it's time to put these seams together. Let me show you how that works. I have one ready here. So the first thing I do with my rows is I press them before I do any stitching. And I'll alternate. One set of rows will go this direction, the other set will go that way. And by doing so, we can nest our seams. And if you remember, nesting is just a matter of putting those seams in opposite direction and snugging them up good and tight. And if I were to cut this chain stitching, and the reason chain stitching is okay to leave as it is enough space between the 2 pieces of fabric that it's not going to pull or create any tugs or tucks or anything like that. But on the other hand, it's also kind of a good safety measure because the threads are less apt to come undone. Even if you clip it like this, you still have that little bit extra thread. So I don't worry about clipping it all the way down. But see how we want these to be exactly lined up like that. And that's going to give us a nice square corner. And so I will go ahead and line those 2 up. And I only do this holding the thread down on the first block. After that I'm good to go. All right, so you can pin this as you go if you want, but I find as long as I hold it initially when I'm sewing, whoops, and then sometimes this is why it can be a good idea to pin, because those corners want to flip up. And so I will stop right there and I'll come to the next seam and line that up and make sure it's good and snug. And so I will hold this while I start sewing, so I make sure my fabric stays where I want it and that my seams are aligned, and then I can just peek in and make sure that it's right there and line up my edges. All right, line this one up and sew. So I go all the way through. Now, you don't have to press first. You can just do your seams as you go. I find it much easier to press my seams first, because then the sewing tends to be more smooth, maybe? Can it be smoother? Does that make sense? And everything is nice and flat. I'm less apt to have, sometimes when you fold a seam, if you don't get it all the way, you get that little tuck in there. And so this way, I've kind of got some pretty clean lines to work with. And it just really makes this part a lot easier, because if you're flipping your seams back and forth as you sew, it just takes more time. All right, so now I've done one, which means I have 3 more to go, and I want to show you how it's going to look. And so we've got our pieces all sewn together, and we have our seams going each way pressed so we can nest, but we haven't pressed these yet. And what I will do is come in and press everything in one direction. It doesn't matter which way you go, because we're going to cut these and kind of flip and turn them. So the seams are going to be going every which way, and there's actually very few that we're going to be matching on here. So let me show you that process. Here's a finished block, and it's all nice and pressed, everything going in one direction. What I want to do now is cut it into quarters. But we're going to go easy on this. We're not going to worry about measuring, and what we want to do is just get these cut into 4 quadrants, or 4 squares. And what I'm going to do is just run my finger to make a crease there, and then I'll put those creases together, and my corners should line up. There we go. And crease here. Oh, there's one of my flip seams. Every once in a while that happens, and I miss them, but I don't worry about it. They get caught up in the pressing and the finishing and the quilting. So what I'm going to do is, I have the creased lines. I'm going to put my ruler right on each side and cut it crossways. And without moving anything, I'm going to turn my ruler in the opposite direction and cut from bottom to top. And then this is going to give me 4 squares. And let's see, they measure about, 5, 10, 11, and not quite a half. So just over 11 1/4. So what I do at this point, the original pattern, while there isn't a pattern to follow per se, the idea is this is just like your disappearing 9 patch. So you would take these and turn them this way. And that looks wonderful. I love it. But what I want to do is I want to mix my 4 squares up. So what I'm going to do is set this stack aside, because I have 4 sets already cut, and I'm going to lay them out in a, how do I want to say this, in 4 different piles. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is one of my blocks. So let me show you. If I do it this way, then you can see how it all went together. Whoops, this goes here and here. Here we go. Okay, that took me a minute. There it is. I had to sit and look at that. Okay, so there's my first 25 patch block, okay? And now I'm going to put my next ones in here, and let's see, I'm going to put this one. Is it going to match? It's not going to match. I'll put the ones in that match first, because otherwise, as I showed you earlier, I get very confused. There we are. And this one. Okay, so that's block number 2. Then we'll start with block number 3. And I'm going to come down here because there's lots of yellow up in that corner. And we'll just kind of put some yellows down in this corner. 2, let's see, this goes this way. And this one goes this way. All right, and my last one. I'm going to put this one here and here. And let's see, this one goes maybe that way. There it is, yep. Okay, so each pile has 4 squares. So I'm just going to set those aside and work with one set of blocks at a time. This way all the colors, the middle strips, the centerpieces all get mixed up between. And it's going to look scrappier rather than have all those lining up in the same block. So we'll just start by putting some squares together. Let's see, how do I want to do this? I want to put this square here and this in the middle. So I want to be consistent as I'm laying this out. And let's see, I don't want those colors together. So I'm going to put that here. And then I'll put, there it is, my little square. And with those 2 little squares in opposing corners, large squares opposing corners, we have our disappearing, I guess we'll call it a 25 patch. But this is a great way to make a scrappy quilt. One of the things I like in particular is that we get 4 of these large squares, and then we have these little, what do I want to say, like lattice strips around it. So there's going to be borders as we work through this. Because the next block that looks like this will come here, and you see that narrow strip is going to go this way. So these 4 patches are going to be encapsulated by a strip, like a lattice strip. Now, if you remember when we did the disappearing 9 patches 2, maybe 3 videos ago, one of the ways to lay it out was exactly like this. And so we would have this one and this one. Basically, it was sort of like this, so that there were narrow strips all the way around it, and there were 4 in the middle. So, you know, there's a lot of similarities. And where was I here? I think that went there, and there we go. This one went up there, and this went here, or something like that. So it's fun to play with different size blocks. You do need to use an odd number. So you know, we did this with 5 across. You could do it with 7. But what we've got, like I said, these are about 11 inch. So we're going to have a 22-inch block. And by making 4 of these, it's going to be 44 in each direction, which is great for a baby quilt. And then if you want, you can make one more set, which is what I did, and add 4 to one end of the quilt just to give it that extra 11 inches. So 44 puts it up to 55. So then it becomes a 44 by 55, which is a nice little lap quilt. So there's some great opportunities here for mixing it up. But right now, I want to put these together and show you how wonderful this looks. Here's this sweet little baby quilt. Oh my goodness, it's just adorable. See each of these 4 blocks from here right down the middle in each direction. You can see the disappearing 9-patch pattern going this way with the large blocks and the small on each side. But you also see, where's the cross? Right here. See this cross? Just like you get in the disappearing 9-patch. It's just that we're using 25 squares instead of 9. So that way you get this 4-patch in here, which I think just adds so much. It just creates another design element in the quilt, and it emphasizes certain colors. It creates a lattice along the way. It's just, there's so much, I like it. I just love the way this this pattern lays out and how it works. It is just fantastic, and it is so easy. Now, this only takes 100 squares. If you happen to have 3 charm packs, because you don't just have a lot of loose ones, then that means you have 126 squares. Let me show you what you can do with that. So I had the extra 25 squares, and I made one more block like this, but instead of sewing it together in a square, I sewed it in a strip, and I added it to the end of the one of the sides, and I made sure that the pattern lines up, because you want to make sure you're consistent with the crosses as well as the small and large blocks to get those diagonal lines through here. And I think it looks wonderful. So you can see just how easy it is. This now is 44 by 55. So we're into a lap size very easily. And you just make one more block and you're good to go. So think how quickly you can make a large quilt if that's something you're looking for, or just how many baby quilts you can make with this. Oh my goodness, it is a super fast pattern, and it is just wonderful. It looks great, and I just think that all the different design elements in here are terrific. And just think about all the different colors. That's what gets me excited. I think about these in black and white, and then have these bright, bold colors. And so that would really create a wild contrast in here. But the other thing, you can see I really went turquoise here, but you can choose pastels, you can go with solids, and whatever you like. There's just so many opportunities. So I hope you give this a try. It is a great pattern, and it is so much fun to make. It's great having you here today. I appreciate you following along. Thanks so much. As always, it is a pleasure to be here with you. Have a great rest of your day.